Well, listening to Wyatt and Jesse share their gifts that God has given them, is your hope in the future not restored just a little bit?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're coming to us today comes on the heels of last Sunday evening. We had an amazing worship experience here with students from Hannah High School, part of a group named Chill. This group's been meeting for several years and has grown over time. Students gather at the school on Friday mornings about 7:15 for worship together, all student-led. They said last Friday they had over 350 young people. God has not left our public schools, folks. Amen. Several of us said last Sunday, listening to the young man who played the piano and sang, and then to the 18-year-old dynamo preacher who delivered, he delivered a message more polished and effective than most of us preachers with 30 years of experience do. Several of us said, our hope in the future has been lifted.
Amen.
Maybe the world is not going to hell in a handbasket after all. I do have to say, though, every time I'm around young people who are displaying their talents and gifts, I look at them and I think to myself, you know, kids in high school sure look a lot younger today than when I was a kid. One of the surest signs of having gotten to the age of being officially old is when we find ourselves more and more starting conversations with things like, well, back in the day, or when I was a kid, or we used to be able to, or we used to go, or we used to have. Have you found yourself in more and more of those kinds of conversations lately? Have you? Well, you're old, okay? Just face it. Old. In many cases, our remembrances of how much better things used to be may be tinted rose-colored by selective memories. One of the memories often debated is this notion that we were much more safe in days gone by. That crime has gotten so much worse. Well, the folks who keep crime statistics say, in some respects, that's not true. And that actually murder and violent crimes are in some places at a 30-year low. Believe it or not.
Praise God.
But it is true, without question, that we have the perception of being less safe today than in the past. And as a result, we have restricted access to places and people who were previously much more available. So our world today is a world of locked doors and security cameras and gated communities and password-protected entries and photo ID required admittance. We are access restricted. Places we once went, we go no more. Places once wide open are now locked up tight as a drum. People we once could meet face to face to talk about an issue, we now press 1, press 6, choose option 3, speak to a computer chip voice recognition device who doesn't recognize your southern accent, okay? We have lost access. Ironically, in a world more connected than ever, we are in some ways more isolated, more disconnected, more alone and afraid. In a world where access was once denied by law, is now by law guaranteed. And yet we still have so many feeling themselves on the outside looking in. Some of you remember a day when access to certain places was by law denied. That reality hit me in the face a few years back when I was having a conversation with a friend and a church member at a church I used to serve. My friend is an African American. This was a church that had once been an all-Caucasian congregation. And he said to me one day, he said, you know, here I am now a trustee of a church where once, when I was a kid, I was not allowed to walk on the sidewalk in front of that church. Some of you remember a time when access to sidewalks and movie theaters and lunch counters and restrooms and water fountains was restricted based on the color of your skin. Thank God those days are over and we don't want to go back. Despite, though, the end of legalized racial segregation and culturally custom-enforced racial segregation, we still have folks who have difficulty gaining access. Now, in today's world, access denied is most often an economic issue. Want to go see a primary care doctor? Well, without insurance or money, access is denied. Want to live in a decent house in a safe neighborhood? Without certain resources or credit scores, access is denied. Need to have your power turned on. Depending on what side of town you live, the deposit required is higher if you're in a lower income neighborhood, like right here. Access denied. Want a job that will pay a living wage and support a family? Unless you have connections, oftentimes access is denied. Some of you know what it is like to have the door shut in your face, or the road blocked on your path, or the way forward become a dead end. And sometimes the barriers we encounter are not only barriers others have put up before you, but sometimes the barriers are self-constructed. The past. Our past gets in the way of the future sometimes. Accessing the future. In particular, things we have done in the past. Mistakes made. Sin committed. Becomes a barrier. And we think it cannot be crossed. And that past, those mistakes, those sins, that guilt we carry on our backs, they're choking off our lives and preventing us from access to hope, which is an essential to go on from day to day. Amen. So we come to church, don't we? We come to church to find that hope. And sadly, in some places, even the church has put up barriers. And we find there is no access. The road is closed. The door is shut and locked. We don't have the right password. That's what Jesus was confronting when he challenged the leaders of his own people, his own religion. He challenged them to open the doors, to let folks know that God has not shut the door, God has not closed the road, God has made a way to life for all of us. Amen. The Apostle Paul wrote a letter to the church in Rome. Rome, the seat of power in that day, the Washington, D.C. of that world. Rome was the center of where those who held the keys of access dwelled. But the people to whom Paul was writing in the church of Rome would have been those who had had the doors of access shut in their faces over and over. They were used to shut doors and blocked roads. Both the doors and roads that others had shut or blocked for them and those they had done to themselves. Paul, in what may be one of the most artful and articulate expressions ever written of who God is and what God has done, Paul says, through Christ, God has made a way. Amen. Through Jesus, God has made a way for all of us. All of God's children have been given access to life through faith and grace. Access to hope through grace. Access to peace through grace. What do I mean by grace? That word. I came across this story told by a Lutheran pastor in Atlanta. It would seem that a young lady one day was speeding through a small Georgia town. She was traveling 70 miles per hour in a 55 mile per hour speed zone. None of you have ever done that, right? Well, the police officer pulled her over, and he wrote a ticket that would cost her $100. She didn't have the money to pay it, and she ended up having to go to court over the ticket. In the courtroom, the judge said, "You were found guilty of going 70 miles an hour in a 55 mile per hour zone. You have to pay $100. And the young lady said, "Well, I'm guilty, but I can't pay it. I don't have $100. "Well, if you don't pay the ticket, we'll have to lock you up for the weekend." "Well, I can't pay the ticket, but I don't want to go to jail. Can you please just have mercy on me?" And the judge matter-of-factly replied, "I can't change the law. The law says you've got to pay $100 or you have to spend the weekend in jail. Those are the rules. I cannot change the rules." Starting to tear up, the young lady spoke in a small voice, "Isn't there something you can do? I can't pay it, but I don't want to be locked up. Have mercy on me." Well, the judge looked down on her. He pushed back his chair from the bench. He zipped down his robe and he took it off. He went over to her side. He picked up his jacket and he put it on. He walked there, stood beside the girl, reached into his wallet, and brought out a $100 bill. He put the $100 bill up on the bench, took off his jacket, then went over, picked up his robe. He zipped his robe back up and he got back behind the bench. "Young lady, you've been found guilty of going 70 miles an hour in a 55 mile per hour speed zone. The law is the law. I can't change it. The law says you must pay $100 or spend the weekend in jail." "Ah, but I see somebody has already paid the price." Pastor William Flipping says, God saw us speeding down the highway of sin. He zipped down the independent use of his deity, and he put on the jacket of humanity, and he came down here, and he died on the cross, and he paid the price that you and I could not pay. He picked up the tab. He rose from the dead. He zipped up his glorified body, and he ascended up into heaven. Amen. Amen. And the good news of the gospel is that a bill that we could not pay has already been paid. Amen. It has been paid. It has been paid by God in the person of Jesus Christ. Now, isn't that good news? We have access. All of us, all of God's children have access to life through grace. And more than anything, that is what I want the core value and the message of this church to be: access. This is a place of access. When you come here, I want you to feel as the door is always open and the love is always available. Amen. Now, that doesn't mean we won't hold one another accountable. For that's what true love does. Amen. We're accountable to how we treat one another and how we treat the world around us. But when you come here, I want you to know that God has made a way for you to a new life. The access is wide open. The door is wide open. The table is set. There's plenty of room for all of us here.
Amen.
Let's pray. How amazing is your grace, oh God, that you would come to us in the humble person of Jesus the Christ. Born of a virgin, a peasant couple, not people with money or authority, just ordinary, everyday folks like any of us. You came into the world. And there you served, bending down, washing the feet of those who were following you. There you gave your life, a victim of a corrupt system that thought they could silence you by nailing you to a cross, but oh, how wrong they were. And by your power, Jesus was raised from the dead. And when he ascended into heaven, he said to those of us who are left behind, I will not leave you comfortless, for I am sending my Spirit to live inside of you. And so today, humble as we are, sinful as we are, meager as we are, you live within us. Your power resides in our heart. We claim that power today, that power of grace, through which the world is transformed. Use us, O Lord, as instruments of your grace and peace and love. Is our prayer. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen.